think this is the time when we ask everyone in the audience as to whether you have clarificatory questions from our speakers. And if you do, this is the time for you to speak up. Someone who would ask one of our speakers about contribution versus attribution. Yes, please. Could you wait for the mic, if you don't mind?
My name is Murli.
Yeah.
I am from IDRC New Delhi. I have the question to, I forget the name, this is regarding KP survey. One of the issues I was really zapped is about the attitude being captured through questionnaire surveys. One of the problems, you know, as a local level worker, the attitude is easily be swept away by various, the kind of, and the way you ask the question. So I think we need to really define what is the attitude that you're talking about. And in the context of climate change, particularly, I would like to mention that the local level concept or the understanding of climate change is very different from the way that we speak. When we speak climate change, we talk about global warming issues and the ramifications out of the global warming. But the people who at the local level, they only understand annual variations in the climate, like rainfall or temperature. So that that distinction you really need to make while you are trying to look at the evaluation. So that is my, I'm really concerned about that attitude being captured by questionnaires, and particularly in the context of climate change. Did you understand me? Otherwise, I can later clarify my understanding.
Thank you so much, Miki. So, are there any other questions? Maybe we can. Yes, please.
Michael Bamberger, thank you very much. Some very interesting presentations. I just wanted to clarify, if I understand correctly, your statement about it being very difficult or perhaps impossible to estimate attribution with long-term programs. I think that the challenge which we face is that if you're only measuring contribution, you can say all of these organizations have made a big contribution, but we've no idea to what. If you have no idea whether the total program has produced any changes, how can you interpret the fact that people have contributed? So I think the issue is whether it's clearly very difficult or perhaps impossible to assess attribution for an individual organization when you have 5 or more organizations working together. I think the challenging question is whether it's possible to assess attribution for all of the impacts combined. And obviously there isn't any magical, very neat methodology, but is it possible to come up with some kind of overall assessment of whether all of the interventions seem to have made some significant change, a little change, no change, things have gone backwards. So I'm not sure whether we can discuss that now, but I hope that will come up during the discussions. And I'd rather you have to address it now rather than me having to address it in our workshop on Thursday and Friday.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's definitely a privilege for us to have you here today. And can I add to something that Michael said? What occurred to me when Bruce was making the presentation was, what if I want to know what the total contribution, how much the total contribution is? And even in that context, we do need to know something about attribution. So even if it is to the group of actors in the landscape. So with that, I think we actually now have an active floor. We have a gentleman here.
Okay, thank you. I'm Madan Pariyar from ID Nepal, actually. I very much appreciate the presentations of these panelists, especially interested in the community-based adaptation presentation, actually, in which, you mentioned different methodology, different procedures. I was wondering, did you make any mention of the local adaptation plan of action? That is very important for a community-based adaptation process in Nepal, and I think it's also true in Bangladesh. So, what's your experience on that? how is it working there actually? Thank you.
Okay, I've been asked by the super chair of this session that I can take only one more question because we do need to allow the speakers to respond to your questions as well. So I'm deferring to him, and I'll take one more question from the lady here. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Omi from Indonesia Climate Change Trust Fund. I would like to ask because the ICCTF or Indonesian Climate Change Trust Fund is one of the focus is on the adaptation aside of the mitigation in land-based and energy. While for the adaptation itself, we are quite challenging on how to measuring at the outcome and also in the output level. We proposing at the outcome level is to have the resilience of the impact of any climate change impact, and at the output level we propose the ability of the actors, whether in the national level or in the regional level, provincial, district, cities, to assess the risk and the vulnerability to of any kind of environment impact. And then the second is about the ability of the actors to identify, or the people to identify the climate effects, and the third is about the capacity building on for all the people. That is the focus is to have the people more adaptive on the climate change impact. So what I'm trying to seek for further explanation on the experience based on the presentation of the panelists. Is there any kind of better approach to define more clear and acceptable indicators? Because we quite about a year of debate to define this set of indicators in adaptations issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. So I have 4 questions in front of me. Just to summarize, first one was how should we measure attitudes? The second one was attribution versus contribution. The third one was did you take into account local adaptation plans of communities, and which is Lucy. And the last one was, do you have any guidance for clear and acceptable indicators for adaptation? So the first one.
I guess I'm going to take the question on attitude first. My personal preference is I would approach attitude very cautiously, because among the 3, that is the most challenging part to measure. It is even more challenging in this part of the world because typically a community member would not stand out with her or his own opinion. Regardless of her own situation, she would try to tell you an opinion that it would be easier to be accepted, and an opinion that the majority of the community would accept. At the same time, if you look at risk profile of different community members within a community, they might be very different. And this is something which makes KAP survey in climate change adaptation very different from other KAP surveys. Because in some other KAP surveys, such as child nutrition, which I was very much involved, a community is relatively homogeneous, which is not the case in climate change adaptation, because, for example, within a small community, people may have households have very different risk profile, and for example, it depends on their house location, their crop area location. So I agree with your statement, and I think that we need to approach attitude measurement very cautiously. I would rely more on knowledge and practice.
Thanks for your question, Michael. It is a bit of the big elephant in the room, isn't it? Attribution, contribution, how to deal with that. I'm glad I gave the disclaimer at the beginning saying that I was oversimplifying. So that allows me to qualify a bit more right now. In terms of looking at long-term contribution, the way we've worked with partners on it is looking at how attribution accumulates over time. Every program is made up of either very clearly defined interventions or projects where direct attribution is more easily established. Whereas a program that looks at basic capacity building through farmer field schools in year 1 and 2 of a 15-year program, it's maybe harder to establish that attribution to 15 years down the line, looking at improved nutrition rates. But for that project itself, you can establish attribution to certain decisions that are being made. And if you design your causal pathways, again, it all comes down to design. If you design that properly and set the right intermediate objectives and intermediate objective indicators, tracking that over time will allow you to, I think, make an assessment about contribution. It's just not from A to B. There's many steps in between that do come down to good design and reflection on the design on an ongoing basis. So I think if you want to summarize it, I would say attribution is much more easily done for shorter-term projects, if you will, whereas contribution is perhaps better expressed for longer-term programs. But contribution is made up of attributions of the individual components. Did I? Yeah. I see a smile. Good.
We come back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then adaptation plan.
Yes, thank you for your question. I know in Nepal you have instigated and implementing the LAPA process. This process has not come to Bangladesh as yet, but is generating much interest within the Bangladesh context. And in Dhaka in April, we're holding CBA 7, the big next international community-based adaptation conference, where we're hoping that some of the key stakeholders from the LAPA process will be coming to present and share lessons learned for the stakeholders in Bangladesh. Within the RCAB framework, however, obviously we're dealing with CBA, which means that communities are driving the processes and we're delivering practice which responds to their priority needs. So in our multi-track system, when we're looking at participatory monitoring evaluation, the first bottom track, this is mainly based on community adaptation plans. Obviously, RCAB is also an INGO-driven approach rather than a local government approach, but definitely community adaptation plans form the basis of the programme for PM&E.
Thank you, Lucy. And